Hello, welcome to episode 131 of the Craft House Magic podcast. My name's Ellie and I'm coming to you from Norwich in Norfolk in the UK, and today is the 3rd of September, so welcome everybody. I hope you've all had a lovely crafty week since the last time I've spoken to you, and I'm here to share the things that I've been making in the last 7 days. So today I have some knitting, some sewing, some cross stitch. There may be a couple of confessions, okay. And I have some questions from the Ask Me Anything thread at the end of the podcast. So you can find me on Instagram, Ravelry and Facebook as Craft House Magic, and I also have a website, crafthousemagicc.co.uk, where you can find my hand-dyed yarns, handmade project bags, stitch markers, higher knitting needles and scissors and other accessories, and also bag making supplies such as fabric wadding, cord and zips, etc. So the summer sock along has just come to an end in the Ravelry group, so if you have entered, do go over and check out the prize winners. I'll just put a post at the end of the thread just stating who's won the prizes and what you've won, so do go and have a look at that. We need a new craft along. So this year, I'm going to have a sort of Christmassy craft along, but it's going to be called the gift along, just because it then leaves it open for different religions, not just Christianity. So it's going to be called the Craft House Magic Gift Along 2020, and you can enter by going to the Ravelry group and just chatting along with a thread, because again I will be drawing prizes for the people who chat along, not just people who finish objects, but I will also be doing it on Instagram as well. So if you use the hashtag CHMGiftalong2020, and I'll put that here so you can see it a little bit better, just come and join in. So it can basically be anything that's gifting for Christmas or whatever sort of wintry festive season that you celebrate. Do come and join in what you're making for gifts, and plus you can gift yourself. So if you are making something for yourself that's sort of either festive or just something special that you're treating yourself to making for yourself, come and join in with the knit along. It's not just knitting, it can be any craft. It's a craft along, so anything that you're making for someone else or for yourself, I'd love to see what you've got in store for this season. So do come and join in on the Ravelry group or on Instagram using the hashtag that I've hopefully put up on the screen. So that's the sort of craft along things that I've got to talk about. So let's get on with the knitting, shall we? I have a finished object, although it isn't blocked. It is the Chevron Shenanigans shawl by Stephen West, and I did cheat a bit because basically my mother-in-law Liz knit most of this, and I've done about an inch and a half just on the end there, because I wanted a little bit more of the purple colour. I could have knitted more of the purple, but I was getting close to running out of yarn, so I decided just to stop there. I think I had about 29 grams left before I started doing the I-cord, and it took me 11 grams to do the I-cord all across the shawl, all the way around. So the I-cord is approximately 1 metre. It's got to be at least 2 meters because there's little pointy bits. It's got to be nearly 3 meters there of I-cord, and it took me 11 grams, so that was good. I did have about 18 left of the last skein, but I'm pleased I stopped where I was, because you never know, I could have run out of yarn. I wasn't quite sure how much it would take. I did read somewhere online that it would take 13 times the edge measurement of yarn to do an I-cord bind off, and according to those calculations I think it was about 10 grams, so being 11 grams that was relatively accurate, but I was so nervous about it I wasn't sure. So I will give this a bit of a block so that this sort of centre portion comes out a little bit neater, but I do love it. It's a lovely big, it's basically a blanket really. So I'd probably just have it around my shoulders really, like this most of the time. Ta-da! You could have it sort of around your neck more with a shawl pin just there, but I just love that pop of colour. Bit of a different colour scheme to what I normally go for, apart from the turquoise bit of course. But I do love it. So what colourways did I use? Last week I missed one of the colours out. How ridiculous. So this top one here is a West Green Loft yarn, so I've got quite a bit of that one left. Let's show you what that looks like. Ta-da! Isn't that gorgeous? I've got quite a bit of that left of that, so I can use it for something else. And that's the Surf's Up colourway. And this one is 100% superwash merino yarn, 100 grams to 400 meters. So that's a West Green Loft yarns. The second colour was this greener one just here. And this one is a yarn that I've had quite a while, and it's a Ball of Love yarns, but I don't think she's dyeing anymore. She did change her shop to Looking Glass Fibre Arts, but I don't think she's dyeing anymore. I couldn't find her shop. It used to be Lizzie+5 on Instagram that used to dye these, but I don't think she does dye anymore. So that's the green one, which is next in the shawl, and I've got that much left. Next after the green is this gorgeous mixture of blues, greens and little pops of pink, just there. And that one is the Snuggly Stars yarn, which was the Nottingham 2018 special edition yarn, and there's a little bit less of that one left, and that's what it looks like on the cake. Isn't that pretty? So that's the third one. So the next colour is this one here, with the sort of pale background with pops of pinks and oranges, and I thought that blended with this one nicely. And this one is a Behive yarns. That's how much I've got left of this one. Not a lot. I'd say probably about 20 grams, but I haven't measured it. And it was the one of the If I Want Exposure I'll Get My Tits Out colourways that everyone was doing a little while ago. And then last but not least is this bright pink and purple one, and this is also one of the Ball of Love yarns ones that that Liz doesn't dye anymore, but I thought that went well with the pinks in the last yarn. I've probably got a little bit too much sort of bluey green at the top of this shawl, but I still love it, and it'll go with loads of my clothes anyway, so hopefully I'll get that blocked for next week. But it does look nice already, because it's made of some lovely garter stitch. So at the end of the shawl I just kept going, following this sort of eyelet increases there and just knitting the rest of the time, but continuing this sort of knit stitch all the way along so that it was continuous, but not following the increases and decreases other than those eyelets. But there we go. You can't even see me. Really pleased about that. So thank you to Liz for knitting most of it. And that's taken 5 skeins out of my stash. So I feel a little bit less guilty about having so much yarn in the house. So that is all I've been really knitting on. But I've been really cheeky. And over the last few months, I've been sending my mum some yarn. So she's been knitting some tubes for me, because she doesn't like doing anything but sort of knits and purls. She doesn't do increases or decreases, my mum. She doesn't even cast on anymore. So I have to cast on and send her some yarn and needles, and she's been knitting these tubes. So first of all, I've got one of the West Yorkshire Spinners Christmas colourways. I think this was possibly 2 years ago, but I have an entire tube, basically knitted the whole ball, so that I can cut into it and make a couple of pairs of socks out of it. And that is wonderful. Thank you very much, Mum. She's a lovely mum, isn't she? She'll love me for mentioning her on the podcast. She watches every week, and she phones me up and complains if I don't get the podcast up on time. The second one I've got to show you is also a West Yorkshire Spinners. And this is the Christmas colourway from I think it must be about 4 years ago, this one. And I had a skein of it gifted to me by my friend Sharon, and I used it to, well, my mum knitted this for me, but then she knitted too far before I did the rib bit, because I knitted the last bit of rib. But I found that I've got a little skein that I knitted a pair ages ago, and this is what I got left, I think, and I was saving it and I'd forgot I'd got it completely. So I'm going to use some of that to cast off this edge properly, and perhaps do the heels and toes in matching yarn as well. But I do love this colour. This is one of my favourite West Yorkshire spinner colourways. Very, very Christmassy. I absolutely love it. So that's another one. And last but not least, she knitted me these gorgeous socks out of a new to me yarn, and I'm really excited to make these into a lovely couple of pairs of socks. But they're a gorgeous yarn from Germany, and it was a lovely friend who sent me a few skeins from Germany, so I can't wait to make these into proper socks. This is a Buttinette yarn, and it's called Wool But Colourful in the... oh, I'm not quite sure whether that is the name or not, but if I show you the label, you might be able to find it yourself. So that's Buttinette, and it's called Wool But. And it was really nice to knit with, because I did knit the cuff before I sent it to Mum, and then I knit the other cuff and did the cast off. But isn't that gorgeous? So Mum and Dad visited last week, so she came to bring back all the tubes that she's been knitting. She's like a bit like my personal sock knitting machine. I'll have to get her to learn how to do the increases and decreases for me, so that I can get in to knit whole projects. Bless her. So thank you ever so much, Mum. I've got 3 sock tubes to turn into lovely socks. I will leave links in the description bar to the yarns that I can still find online as well, if you want to get hold of some. So now it's the sewing section, so I'm going to ask Barbara to come over and show us what she's wearing. Come on, Barbara. Thank you very much, Barbara. So Barbara is wearing my hack of the Sew Over It Eve dress pattern, and I've cut it off to make a top. I'm not sure whether it's quite long enough actually, and to be honest, I'm really not pleased with the finish that I've made on this top, but it is certainly something I'd make again. And I love this bright pink colour, I think it's lovely. So basically what I did is I measured 9 inches into the skirt pattern, and then traced out another pattern piece so that I could keep that to make tops with. The rest of the top is made exactly the same as the Eve dress, apart from I made the ties slightly shorter. So with the Eve dress pattern, I was basically using the largest size, and then I added about 6 inches I think for the ties, just because I like them to be quite long. For this one I used the length of a size 12 so that they wouldn't hang down too much past the sort of bottom of the top. It's actually made exactly the same as the Eve dress, just with shorter panels at the bottom. It's a crossover top, and these ties, if I undo it, they go round the back, but one goes through a hole in the seam that you leave. Just don't stitch all the seam up, and there's a little gap to stop the seams sort of gaping out of the hole. I actually stitched in the ditch over the top of this seam just to hold the sort of flaps open either side so it doesn't gape through, which I thought was a good idea. I will be doing that to my other versions, and you can see that this is a completely wrap top. I pull that through again, through that hole, and then this crosses over, and then I normally put it around the back and then tie it at the front just to the left of the garment. I basically used an overlocker to finish this, and I used a grey thread, which was not a good idea because you can actually see it under the arm. For the sleeve, I actually turned that up twice so that you can't see that grey overlock stitch. So normally I try and use the closest match I could, but I thought because I hadn't spent very much on this fabric and it was sort of a wearable muslin because I've not made a top version of the dress before, I thought, oh, it'll be alright just using grey thread because that's the closest match I had. But to be honest, I should have just done French seams instead so that you couldn't see that under the arms there, so you can just see that grey overlock thread. Maybe you won't notice it when I've actually got it on, but it annoys me so much. I wish I'd have done French seams instead, or just purchased the right colour thread. But because you have to have 4 threads for the overlocker, it can turn out quite expensive if you're not going to use that colour very often. The original modifications that I'd done to the sew over it dress was basically I used the size 12 shoulders and I graded out to the largest size at the waist and went out even further for the hip. So the older patterns for sew over it only go up to a size 20 and I was just over that over the hips. So I just graded out a little bit more. I don't mind grading out if it's only sort of one size, but any more than that it's a bit of a pain. But now a lot of the sew over it patterns go right up to a size 30, I think, which is really, really handy. Much better. I think that was it for the modifications. But if you're interested in learning a bit more of how I'd done the sew over it dress, I have a couple of other episodes and we'll put the episode numbers in the description box if you'd like to see those dresses as well. So you can have a look back at the modifications I did to the original pattern when I had it more fresh in my brain. So I'm really pleased with the colour of this. I'm just not really enamoured with the fact that I've used grey overlock stitches. Oh dear. I have to do it again. Also, I think that I might want it to be very slightly longer just here where the overlap is, just so that it goes over my hips a bit more. I shall take it off Barbara and put it on so you can see what it looks like on me. So there we go, that's what it looks like on me. I'm feeling that it could have been just an inch longer there to look a little bit more flattering, but I do like the shape of this and I'm certainly going to make some more, just with it being an inch longer and obviously not using flipping grey overlock thread underneath the arms because I can see it. I'm glad I ended up, so normally I just overlock, turn the seam and then top stitch it, but because you could see the overlock stitch is quite bad because it's sort of very floaty, I ended up just turning it up a second time and top stitching it again, which I think's okay. It's just those inside seams that show a little bit, but you might not even be able to notice if I keep my arms down. But there we go. I do love the way that the Eve dress has this panel at the top there and there's some gathers which keep the fullness for the bust without having too much fullness over the shoulder. Really like the shape. So yeah, I definitely think I just need a tiny bit more length on this to make it flattering. These, obviously I've got jeans on at the moment, but I think I could wear that with a black skirt as well, just to dress it up a bit more. But there we go. Ta-da! I'm not going to do twirls in the garden today because it's been absolutely chucking it down with rain. So you've only got me in the craft room today, I'm afraid. I have to do my prancing around in here. So the fabric I used was a Vicose, a bright pink Vicose that I purchased from Rainbow Fabrics, and I purchased a 2 metre piece, and I could have probably got away with 1.5 meters, but they only sell fabric by the metre, so I had to buy 2 meters, but it was very inexpensive, so that was fine. And you can see what colour the overlock stitches I've used are, and quite noticeable if you can see them under the sleeve, which is a bit annoying. But there you go, you learn stuff, and I'm definitely gonna, to be honest, I'm probably gonna use lots of bright pink fabrics anyway, so maybe I should just buy some bright pink overlock thread. I did have some, but I only had a couple of spools, so it wouldn't have been the whole thing, but there you go. I'll show you the inside of the garment all the way down, and I was talking about before how there was a gap in the seam to allow for the ties to go through, and I've basically, so this bit was sort of loose and I've top stitched in the ditch on that seam down there to keep it down on either side, so you can see there's stitches there and there to keep it from sort of going through the hole, because it's a very lightweight viscose and the overlock stitches were showing through there as well. So not a good idea to use grey overlock threads. And I'm definitely going to add an inch to the length, I think, so it would have been 10 inches into the skirt panel rather than 9 inches, which I'd cut for that one. So for my cross stitch update, I have done quite a bit this week. I've been sticking to my 20 minutes, well, at least 20 minutes. At the weekend, I spent ages stitching on this. So if I come a little bit closer, you'll be able to see. It's a bit creased because I've had it all creased up one side when I was stitching on it. So I have done this tree here, And I've just started adding the sort of berries onto it. So this side here, this is what this side's going to look like when it's finished with all the berries on it. So it looks a little bit like a Halloween tree without the berries, but you can see here it's much prettier when you've got that bit of pink on there as well. So that is coming along really nicely. So this pattern is by Moira Blackburn, and I got this kit from a charity shop quite a while ago. And it is actually one that was printed in the 80s, I think, because the actual sampler itself says 1989 in the top corner. I can't see where it is. I think it's that side. It's difficult for me to see on the camera, but just say 1989 and Moira Blackburn. But I have noticed that they definitely have started selling it in a number of shops, so I will leave a link to one of the UK suppliers that I found. I'm definitely over 50% now, so hopefully next week I'll have got all the berries done and I've started the border, which is very exciting. I feel like I might actually finish it by Christmas. I said this last year, I'm sure. It must have been at least 3 years ago when I started it. But there we go. I'm thinking I shall start on the bottom bit, on that bit next, but we'll see. I'll make my mind up when I come to sit down to do it. So that's my cross stitch section, and I have some confessions to share with you now. Oh dear. Actually, it's good because I'm supporting a small business on Etsy. So my friend Jo was telling me that she'd got some gorgeous fabric from an Etsy shop, and it was called Elsa Fabrics, and it's a shop in Ascot in the UK. She had this gorgeous floral print, so I went over and I might have purchased 3 different fabrics from this shop, and they seem really nice quality. So I'll show you the boring one first. It's a navy blue and white stripe fabric, and this is 150 centimeters wide, which is 60 inches, and it's 95% cotton and 5% spandex, and it's woven rather than printed on, because you can sort of see the knit stitches on the back of the fabric, if I can show you close up. As you can see the rows of knit stitches on this side. I'm not quite sure whether you can see that. Hopefully that's focused in. And on the right side, obviously, it's a nice clean stripe. So I got that one. I think I bought a metre of this. Does seem quite a lot there. It might have been more. Oh dear. Secondly, I bought a beautiful floral. I think this is probably my favourite. I absolutely love this fabric. It's like a watercolour, and this is a jersey fabric as well. I bought a metre so that I could make a t-shirt with. I might have to purchase some more of this one. So this one is 150 centimetres or 60 inches wide, and it is 92% cotton and 8% lycra, and it says that it's Okotex certified, which sounds good. So I've got a metre of that. So this one has got a plain white back, and it is printed on the front. If you stretch it out, the colour retention is still quite good. I wouldn't make something so that it was that tight anyway, but it is pretty good if you don't stretch it too much. But I'm really pleased. I think that's a really good quality printed floral fabric. And of course you need more flowers, don't you? So I bought some more. I think this is one my friend Jo bought, but I got 2 meters of this one. It's the same composition as the one I've just showed you. 92% cotton, 8% lycra, and Okotex certified. It is 150 centimeters or 60 inches wide, and it's again another printed one. But oh, look at those flowers. I got 2 meters to make a dress, and it's the, I can't think what it's called that I'm going to make. It's the dress out of Tilly and the Buttons stretch book that is on the front cover with the twist bit at the front. I will put the name of it in the description box and hopefully put a picture of it on the screen so you know what I'm actually talking about, but I can't think of what the name is. Oh goodness me. I'll remember it later, but you all know what I mean because everyone knows about Tilly and the Buttons patterns. So that's what I was intending to make with that one. I'm not quite sure which of the t-shirt patterns I'm going to make with this one, but I think that is going to be gorgeous. So I've already bought 3 fabrics. It's very well behaved. Very, So I have some questions from the Ask Me Anything thread next. So I've got a question from Katie, and she was saying, what are my favourite socks? I found this really difficult. I've picked 3 pairs out of my sock stash of my hand knitted socks to show you which were my favourites. These are quite worn, so they look a little bit fuzzy on the soles, I'm afraid. But the first I've got to pick here is the Cha-Cha Chevron socks, and this is a gorgeous pattern by Sandra of the Cherry Heart podcast. And this yarn was dyed especially for the Strictly Sock Along by Little French Meadow in the It's a Disaster Darling colourway, and I love saying that. Oh dear, but I just love these really simple sort of chevron patterns, and they've been worn quite a lot, so you can see that they've faded on the bottom just a little bit, but these are some of my favourite socks. They are a heel flap and gusset pattern with some slip stitches, and the heel flap is always a good way, it's always a good one to turn to because you get an extra space for your instep there, so that's one of my favourite pairs. I also love self-striping yarn, and this is a lovely sock set that I bought from down Sheepy Lane, and it's, I can't remember what the colourway was called, but she does these gorgeous gobstopper balls, and this was knitted with one of those. They have been worn quite a bit, so the colour on the heel I think has come off my shoe a bit at some point. But they are still one of my favourite pairs of socks. Love this sort of chocolatey and pink colours together. Gorgeous. And the third pair I've got to show you is actually one of the patterns that I've designed. This is the Country Garden sock pattern, and it's knitted in my I'll Be There For You colourway with the contrast colour that I normally sell as the sock set, but I just really like this colour with this pattern. The original pattern was actually designed to go with the English Country Garden colourway, which is a blue, but this sort of purpliness, I just loved it together, so that's one of my favourite pairs too, and I tend to reach for those quite often. So the second part of the question was, what are Adam's favourite socks? So I asked him to go into his sock stash and tell me what his favourite socks were. And I said, well, think about the way they fit as well. What are your favourite patterns that you like that sort of fit your foot snugly? He just ignored that part of my suggestion. He just picked the ones that he was most emotionally attached to. So first of all are the socks that I knitted for our wedding day. So he had to wear these when it was really hot. And these are a gorgeous pattern, and they're by Ruth McKeon, who used to be called Knitterarian, but I'm afraid she doesn't do sock patterns anymore. But this was the Mr. Darcy sock pattern, and I just love these little twists here. And he loves these basically because I knitted them for our wedding day, I suppose, and it's a bit of a memory for him. I forget what the yarn was that I used, but I will put it in the description bar. I know the toes are West Yorkshire spinners, but the teal colour was a different yarn, and I'll look it up on Ravelry and I'll put it in the description bar if you wanted to find out what it was. But it was quite an old yarn that I had in my stash before I knitted them, so I'm not sure whether you'd be able to find them. But so that's a heel flap and gusset version of the sock, but I don't think it make any difference how the heel was knitted. He likes them because they were knitted for our wedding day, and he actually wore them on our wedding day, which was very sweet of him, bless him, when it was really hot. The second pair he picked are his Slytherin socks that I dyed and knitted for him. So obviously he got picked as a Slytherin out of the Harry Potter sorting hat, and I needed to knit him some Slytherin socks. So it's just some micro striping, grey and green. And he just likes these because he loves Harry Potter, really. He's just a big kid like me, really. And I basically used my simple top-down sock pattern, which I have a free pattern for on Ravelry and on my website, and I have some video tutorials for this pattern as well. So this is knitted top-down, but I also have some tutorials for the toe-up as well. I will put links up in the corner and in the description bar for those tutorials and patterns as well. So those are all free. So those were the favourite socks that Adam picked. So the next part of the question was, what is my favourite colourway of my own yarn? So at the moment, my favourite colourways are Nothing's Gonna Stop Us Now and Smells Like Teen Spirit, I think, and these are all caked up ready to knit a shawl with, which I will maybe get started for next week, who knows. It is a DK pattern, so I didn't start it earlier in the year because I just felt that it was a bit warm to be knitting on a DK shawl, so watch out for that. So the next part of the question is, what colours do I want to dye in the future? I have an idea of quite a few sort of muted colour sets, which some are in the advent calendar, so watch out for those. But in the new year I'll be releasing a lot more sort of mini sets and sort of gradient things, which I'm excited about. I'm so excited that I want to cast them on now and I can't, because they have to be a surprise for the advent calendars, so watch out for those when they start popping up on Instagram in December. I think I might keep one for myself as well, so you can see how they look when I show them on Vlogmas. I think that'll be quite exciting. So I hope that answers your question, Katie. Sorry it took me so long. I have quite a few other Ask Me Anything questions from the Ask Me Anything thread. I'll answer a couple more today, but I might leave the rest till next week because they do take a little bit of time to answer. And we don't want to make the podcast too long. So the next question is from Erin, and she was asking, she has a lot of fabric scraps left over from dressmaking, and she wondered what I use them for. So she was specifically interested in sort of what to do with rayons and polycotton fabrics. So I tend to, obviously you were saying as well, Erin, that you use your cotton scraps for using in patchwork and things. I tend to sometimes use polycottons for making bags and things as well sometimes. But it's very difficult to know what to do with rayon fabrics. I suppose you could use small pieces for sort of highlights on a garment. So if you've got a little bit of yoke, you could use scraps of leftover fabric from one print to complement another print, which I sometimes think, oh, I'll do that with lots of my fabrics, and I keep them for ages and ages and then never do. So there's a limit to what you can do with that sort of idea. I do tend to use jersey scraps for making underwear with, which is quite useful, but because I've got quite a big bum, I need quite a wide piece to put my underwear pattern on, so sometimes that isn't the best use for scraps as well, because you need quite big pieces to do those with. And I have heard that some people collect scraps to then make like a footstool with, to fill a footstool with, but they do end up being quite heavy. And I wondered whether you guys had any ideas of what you'd do with fabric scraps after dressmaking, because it can be quite wasteful making garments as well. So I'm interested to see what you guys have got to say. So that is a brilliant question, thank you, Erin. So the next question is from Amanda, and she was asking me, what is my preference for scissors and rotary cutters? So I tend to have a lot of these Vicose scissors. I have a tiny little pair like this, which I use a lot when I'm using my sewing machine, and I use that to snip the threads on things, and anything quite delicate I use those for as well, to getting nice and close. And I do have, in my bobbin lace kit, I've got a pair of scissors that's curved on the end, which really helps you get close as well, but I haven't got those out to show you, but I will leave links down below to the ones that I have. I have a massive pair of dressmaker's scissors in the Vicose, and a sort of medium-sized pair, and to be honest, I tend to use these more because they're just easier for me to handle. They are quite a nice sharp scissor at a reasonable price. There are more expensive scissors which I might purchase in the future, but these have worked well for me so far. I do have a scissor sharpener as well, which I should get out to show you. So this is my scissor sharpener. You basically put the blades of your scissors in there and do a cutting motion, but I'm not going to do it because it makes such a squeaky noise that you'll be saying, Ellie, that's awful, that sounds. But you basically put it in and snip and draw the scissors towards yourself, and that gives them a nice sharp edge when they're starting to get a little bit blunt. The scissors I sharpen the most often are these, because I use those loads. I have a tassel on mine because I quite often I'll take these, well, when we used to meet people, I used to take these to my quilt group, and I knew that they were mine because they've got this random little tassel hanging on the end. But those are the scissors I tend to use. This is a Vicose scissor sharpener as well, because I thought, well, if they make the scissor sharpener, then that should be okay for all their scissors. So that's why I purchased this one. I will leave a link to this scissor sharpener in the description bar down below. Obviously they do get blunt at some point with use, even if you don't use it for anything anywhere near paper. Eventually your scissors will get a little bit blunt, and then this scissor sharpener comes in handy. I tend to use this on some of my sort of paper cutting scissors as well, because they get blunter much quicker. I have a range of different rotary cutters. My favourite is this one. This is from Alpha, and it's got a more ergonomic handle. It's easier to hold than the original one. So this is the older style, which is not too bad, but this, if you're doing a lot of cutting, it just makes it a little bit more comfortable. This is obviously a pinking blade, which I find quite useful as well. But I've got a rotary cutter that I've got set up that I just use for paper and card, one with a pinking blade on, and then one I use just for fabric. And I keep them all next to each other, and I know which one's for which, so I don't use one's for fabric. I don't use that one for paper as well. I keep that one nice so that it's nice and sharp. The blades I tend to use now, I've gone back to using the proper Alpha blades. I did have a stint of using some different manufacturers' blades, but I don't think that they were quite as sharp when you get them out the packet, although they are quite a lot cheaper. So there's the swings and roundabouts really. I have purchased a sharpening tool for the rotary cutter blades, but I haven't really used it an awful lot yet, so I can't say whether I'd recommend that or not. So I hope that answers your question, and hopefully you have less issues with scissors getting blunt quickly. It might be due to other people in the household using them for things that they shouldn't. I go mad if Adam goes near my scissors. Adam, don't you touch them for anything but fabric. No, he's actually very good. It's my dad that was the issue before, when I lived at my home with my parents. So that's my question from Amanda. Thank you very much, Amanda. And I'm just going to do one more question this week. I will leave the other 4 questions until next week, because we've chatted quite a lot already, haven't we? So this one's from Sarah, and she was asking me, how do I wash my fabrics before I use them? And also, how do I stop them fraying? And I think Amanda also asked me about fraying as well. So if I'm having, for instance, with this jersey fabric, I won't overlock it because it will not fray. I will just stick it in the washing machine, and I normally use on my washing machine setting a standard, I think it's 59 minutes standard wash, and I always wash everything at 30 degrees. One, because it's sort of better for the environment, and also because I think keeping things on quite a cool wash helps them last a bit longer. So that's the wash that I normally do for my clothes all the time. So I'll use the same wash on fabrics before I then make them up into a garment, so that you know that there isn't going to be any additional shrinkage. So I'll wash those with some normal washing powder and some softener in there as well, as I would with any other piece of clothing, and get it dry. And when I'm hanging it up, if it's something that's going to distort, I'm just a little bit careful about what I lay it over to dry on, because sometimes if you lay it over a curve, it might stretch the fabric out a little bit. So where you can, I'd leave it as flat as possible. I have a clothes horse which has got a flat area, which is ideal for drying fabrics before you're then going to cut them out to make clothes with. And always give them a press before you cut something out as well. So in terms of fabrics that fray a lot, like viscose, rayons, etc., I'll run it over the overlocker just on the edges so that it doesn't fray and clog up your washing machine. You could always just use a zigzag stitch as well if you haven't got an overlocker. So I hope that's helpful. If you have any additional questions, just pop a comment down below or come over to the Ask Me Anything thread in the Ravelry group. I'm happy to try and answer your questions as best I can. So I think I'm going to leave that for today and answer the rest of the questions next week. But thank you so much for all your questions recently, and I've been a bit rubbish at only doing one question per week, so I haven't caught up with myself, but hopefully next week I will, and I'll have a lot more to show you hopefully. I've been very busy sorting out advent calendars and mistletoe kisses sock kits, so hopefully in the next week or so I'll have more sort of knitting time for myself, so I'll have more stuff to show you in the podcast. So thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you'd like to see more, and I shall see you at next week's episode. Bye!